As I spoke about a minute ago, one of the things I love most is teaching. And I'm teaching at an Advanced Consciousness 2 class right now. And one of the things we're doing every morning is we're reading Mark Nepo's book, The Book of Awakening. How many of you have read The Book of Awakening? Every day, right? It's just, Oprah Winfrey calls him one of the 5 wisest teachers on the planet. And this book was the book that brought him notoriety and gave him his first New York Times bestseller. And so today, when I woke up, the first thing I did was read it. And the quote was like so perfect for what we're doing here today and what this final week of equanimity is all about. And it's this. He says, the more I experience and survive, the more I find truth in the commonalities we all share. Let's just think about that for the minute. The more I experience of life and the more I survive all of these things that go on in life, the more I find truth in the commonalities we all share. And Mark wrote this book 12 years, I believe, after he had stage 4 cancer. And it was about his realization of where he is now in his life in terms of facing his mortality. And what does it feel like 12 years later? And it's interesting because I'm now 14 years past having stage 4 cancer, when I really did face my mortality in a very profound way, because I was told the prognosis was not necessarily all that positive. It was like, do your best and see what happens. So, here we are, I am 14 years later, and I get it. I really get it. We've all of our experiences are common, even as they are individual. If you've had a baby, you're common to everyone who's ever had a baby, even though it's your individual experience of it. If you've gotten married, you are common to all the people in the universe that have gotten married, even though you have an individual experience of it. Has anyone here ever had a cold? Right? We've all had colds, and yet it's our cold, but we're common to everything. So I absolutely loved that. So my first quote is from Mother Teresa, and she said, "If we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other." I mean, think about that. How often in your life do you find yourself not at peace? And if you really took the time when you're not at peace with yourself, I bet you could trace it back to some part of your life causing you to feel separate, causing you to feel alone, and causing you to feel victimized by something in life that did something to you, or even something in your past that's continuing to do something through you. So I love this quote. We have forgotten that we belong to one another. And that doesn't mean we belong to only those that are a part of our political party, by the by. It means we belong to one another, all people, everywhere, no matter what. So the title of my talk today is, Where Do You Belong? Stan just sang this beautiful Tom Petty song. You belong in the wildflowers. You belong on a boat out in the beautiful ocean. You belong, my own stuff, on a beautiful mountaintop. You belong on a gorgeous hike, on a beautiful trail. You belong on your paddle boat, just moving through the waters. You belong in the arms of someone who loves you unconditionally. Yes, you do. You belong in all those places. But the truth is, when I say, where do you belong, I mean in your mind, your personal decision, where do you belong? How many of you have had the experience where many people in your life have told you where you belong? Right? People, you belong. One of my favorite ones, or you should do this. Anybody? Right? You should do this. You'd be so good at this. You would be so good at this. Right? And then that goes into your head. And people are constantly always seeing stuff about you. But the real question is, where do you belong authentically within you? Where in you? I remember my aunt Agnes, who I absolutely loved. I think she's probably the first person that knew I was gay when I was 3. No, but I think she was the first person that knew I was gay, probably even more than I did. When I remember she came home one day from her hairdresser's, and I was downtown at my grandmother's, and I think I was probably like, I don't know, how old was I? Maybe 12, 13, something. And she came over to me and she goes, my hairdresser is so much like you. And she said, have you ever thought about being a hairdresser? I was like, no, I haven't thought about being a hairdresser, actually. And she said, but I know you sing, and he gave me some vocal exercises for you. And someday we should go have lunch with him so you can see what his life is like. And I remember at the time thinking, this is odd. A, I'm not interested in being a hairdresser, and I don't need a hairdresser to teach me how to sing. It was just so odd. But I think what she was saying is, here's your future. So she was very easily, she was like, you should. But I loved my Aunt Agnes. I still have mixing bowls she bought me when I was a 20-something-year-old in New York City, when I moved to New York City. She showed up once, took the Amtrak all the way from Philadelphia, and showed up with a bunch of mixing bowls for me, right? I still have them. I think about her all the time. So that's my question today. Where do you belong? And are you perhaps belonging in your life based on what others think about you, or what others have perhaps suggested for you? Last night in Palm Springs, Reverend Dr. Laurie Savage gave a talk about living in a bubble, and she talked in one moment, she was talking about things in life that you experience that changes you, that brings something out in you. And as I was sitting there, just as a congregant, I got all emotional because I remembered something. And it was when I was 19 years old, and Angela Lansbury had come through Philadelphia with Gypsy on its way to Broadway. And no surprise, I wanted to see Gypsy. That should have been a clue right there, that I just wanted to go I got on a bus all by myself from Northeast Philadelphia, took the bus into Center City, went to the box office, asked for a ticket, got a ticket way up in the balcony of the Forest Theater. And, bum, 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 the orchestra started, and I was like, and I'd never seen a show. I'd never seen a Broadway show. I'd been in shows in high school, but I'd never seen a professional show like this. And this play started going, and then this young boy came out playing Tulsa, singing All I Need Now Is a Girl, and it was just him on stage by himself singing and dancing. And I'm way up in the balcony, he's like a little pea down there. And I was like, that's me. That's what I want. And something in me, something inside of me was so connected to that young man, John Sheeran. It just blew me away until the end of the show, when Angela Lansbury and the theater had been built with a big catwalk all the way around the orchestra, so she's like right in the audience, until she started singing Rose's Turn. And then I was like, forget him, I want to be her. Seriously, I was like, that's me. I want to be the only one on that stage, and I want to It was so ingrained in me. I mean, have you ever had that? Where you see something and you're like, that is me. That's what I want. For many people, what they get to is, I belong up there, but I don't know how to get there. That seems a lot. That seems like it would take a lot. I was in Philadelphia. I wasn't even studying. I mean, I was in college, and I was doing theater, but I was studying psychology, and I still had a thought that I might want to be a priest. That left very quickly. So that thing inside of us that keeps driving us does not change as you get older. We just cover it up. We just stop listening to it. We start filling ourselves with reasons why I couldn't do that, or maybe I can't do that, or, oh, that was then, this is now. And I have to tell you, so I was 19. When I was 30, and I'd already starred in a Broadway show and starred in off-Broadway shows, and I got the starring role in 42nd Street, the young leading man. And the tour my end of my tour, I signed a year's contract, ended in Philadelphia at the Forest Theater. And I remember the day we loaded in, and they were doing light cues, and they rolled that, if any of you know 42nd Street, one of my big numbers was called We're in the Money, and it was a giant dime that gets rolled onto stage, dropped stage, and then everybody poses up at me, and then I do this huge tap dance on the dime. And they brought the dime in. No one was there but me and the dime, because they wanted to make sure that the spot was going to hit me properly. And I was standing on that dime, just in my street clothes, at the Forest Theater, looking up at that balcony, at that seat that the 19-year-old me sat in. And I was like, we did it. That is what we teach here. We teach that the dream in your heart is equal to the dream in your reality. We teach that when you are so attuned, so one with who you are, when you remember who you are, and something comes up and says, I belong here, that you follow it, and you allow the universe to take you right along on its dream, because that's the way this works. When that happened last night, I was really very moved. I'm still moved, just thinking about that. And then I started thinking, driving home last night, I was like, from Palm Springs, I was like, you were driving home. Which is why I got to think. Yeah. I started thinking, but that was the deal. I would go if you drove. As Kevin was driving home last night, I was thinking to myself, I was like, where do I belong now? I will tell you this. At Asilomar one summer, I was sitting in Merrill Hall, and James Golden, who was the president at the time, came out and spoke, and I had that feeling again, and I got that, oh, shit, I'm going to be a minister. And I had no interest in being a minister. And most ministers will tell you they had no interest in being a minister. I was with CAA, I had a movie that I'd just written. I was like, no, I'm doing really well. As an actor, as a writer, as a director, wouldn't ministry just wouldn't this just totally destroy my whole life, as Kevin has said it has? But something in me, watching James Golden, of all people, James Golden, who ended up leaving ministry and becoming a Buddhist something or other. Brilliant man. That moment, that moment where here I was, and I'm like, I see myself there. I ended up being the last speaker on that stage right where he stood at Asilomar when we left Asilomar for the first time. I was the last speaker of the week. And I thought about that. I was like, I remember saying, I want to do that. Now I'm the last one speaking up here before we move out into the world when we started going to Chicago and places. This is the way it works. What is in your heart? So my question to you this morning is this. Where do you feel your most authentic self? Where do you feel like your most authentic self? The question is, where do you belong? Well, you know what? You belong where you feel your most authentic self, wherever that is. You know where you don't belong? Where you don't feel your authentic self. You don't belong in jobs and relationships and in bodies that don't feel right to you. Now, if you are in those things, there's just work to do. That's all. Where do you feel your most authentic self? And then the question I have is, what is driving you? I know what drives me. There are moments it hits me, and I'm going, oh my God, yes, this is what I want. Something came up for me. I have a new idea for 2025, something I really want to do. I'm not going to talk about it, but it came up, and I thought, I should Google this and see if anybody else has done it. So I did. I Googled it, and someone else had done it, but he gave it up like 2017 and changed it to something else. I was like, good. And then I went, and even if he did, does it matter? if this is what came to me. And I always check and see, if it comes to me, do I still feel it when I wake up the next day? And I have every day that I've woken up since this idea came to me. So I'll tell you all about that at some point. So what's driving you? There's something inside of you driving you, and here's what shouldn't be driving you. Monkey mind. And this world out here, the world of effect. Tara Brach said, lifelong longing felt fully carries us to belonging. When was the last time you really had a longing inside of you? When's the last time you had something so exciting? Dr. Karen Oxrider, last night, she also gave a talk in Palm Springs. And listening to her talk about her travels and what inspires her, what makes her who she is, was chilling. I mean, I had goosebumps listening to her talk about the places she went. And she was talking about this tongue. What was it called? Troll's tongue in Norway. And you probably already saw the picture. But she showed the picture of it, and she talked about how you have to climb 9 hours. It's a 9-hour climb up to the tongue, and it's about a 20,000 drop down if you fall off it, by the way. And it's a 9-hour hike down it. And so she said, I had all these questions like, can I do this? Can we really go for 18 hours? And she said, but we decided to do it anyway. And then all the things that needed to happen came into play. And then she showed the picture of her and Brad on the tip of the tongue. And I gasped. I was like, oh my God, this is the way it is. What is in your mind today that you want to realize? Longing felt fully. Not longing with all of the yeah buts involved. How many of you do that? Yeah, it's like, I'd love to do this, but blah, 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 blah. So what's longing? What is inside of you that you've been just dying to do? So Brene Brown said this, a deep sense of belonging. Remember, the question is, where do I belong? A deep sense of longing is an irreducible need of all people. We are biologically, cognitively, physically, and spiritually wired to love, be loved, and to belong. When those needs are not met, we don't function as we were meant to. You don't function well if you are not where you belong. You don't function well if you are not following your heart, following the drive in your soul. You don't. That's where illness comes from. That's where all this stuff shows up in our lives. So, Maya Angelou, I long, as does every human being, to be at home wherever I find myself. So here's the thing. When I say, where do I belong? It's not a place. It's not even a thing. It's not even an experience. Am I willing to remember who I am wherever I am? And that question, remember who I am, really does ask a deeper question, which is, where do I belong? Where do I belong in this world today? Honestly, I don't belong right now on the stage of the Forest Theater. I don't. I did, and I did. You know, I don't belong in a number of places where I thought I would never leave. I don't belong in New York City, living in New York City right now. But I did. There was a time when I thought, you will never get me to move anywhere but New York City. Anybody? Right? And then you're like, I would never want to live there. So we do evolve. We do change. We do grow. You know, we talked about the Joffrey Ballet. I do not belong on a ballet stage. These legs do not belong on the ballet stage right now. But I did at one point. I remember going to Pennsylvania Ballet for my first class and watching those guys jeté across the room and lift those girls up in the air. And I was just watching because I was taking the beginner class following it. I was like, I want to do that, until I didn't want to do that. That's how it works. So, Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, here's the real question today. Tell me with whom you associate, and I will tell you who you are. When this quote came up when I was looking for something, I was like, wow. are the people in my life the people that I want in my life? And if I look around at the closest people to me, what does that say about me? Now, luckily, this came up very good for me in my life. But I went backwards and I went, what about when I was hanging out with this group? It was all about something completely different than my authentic self. It was me wanting to be something that I wasn't. Lisa and I just had an experience where we went to, and I came home, I told you last week, thinking, I know exactly who I don't want to be, and I know exactly who I am. So the real question is, are you in the right place, with the right people, living your most authentic life? And if you're not, then what? Where do you belong? Do you belong in this room on a Sunday? Yes. Well, that was very nice. Thank you. Who said that? Thank you, Nick. I just realized it was your voice. But that's a question. There were times when I realized I didn't belong in a certain room I was in. I remember once we had a meeting, a practitioner meeting, and I did a visioning for that practitioner class. And somebody, one of the practitioner students, when it was all over, I asked everybody to share what came to you. And this person said, what came to me is that I shouldn't be here. And I was like, oh, okay. And she got up and left. That was it. But that was perfect. That was exactly right. Right? So, where do you belong? And where do you find yourself belonging these days? Because I have a great quote for you. It's this one. I don't want to belong to any club that will accept me as a member. Do you have a little bit of that going on? Because that's something to think about. Sometimes we get settled somewhere and think, why am I with all these people? Why am I in this group? Why am I doing this? When actually it is where you're meant to be. So it goes the other way as well. And then my last quote, which is probably the most important quote, is this. If you are not having fun, you are doing something wrong. Because at the end of the day, where you belong, back to what Stan just sang, where you belong is in an experience of life that you enjoy, that you love, that you wake up in the morning and you cannot wait to start your day. You are in an experience of this thing called life where all of your friends excite you. They broaden you, they expand you. And that doesn't mean they're all like yes people. They're all just like love everything you do. No, some of them don't. Some of them question you. Some of them push you. There was a great quote, another quote, and it was this. It was, if you find yourself in jail, one of your closest friends will come and bail you out. Your best friend will be there with you saying, that was fun. Thank you for getting that. Did you get what I just said? You're all like, yeah, I did. I love that. I want friends that are going to land in jail with me. And then I'll call Kevin to bail us out. But seriously, if life isn't fun, if you're not having fun doing what you're doing, or you know my quote, if you can't put your heart in it, take yourself out of it. Because your heart is meant to be where your heart thrives, where your heart grows, where your life expands, where everything about you is tingling with anticipation and excitement for what comes next. And if that's not where you are, I'm here to tell you that's where you belong. So get there. Namaste.